We just learned how we could create two different types of controller handler methods that respond dynamically. In other words, they generated a different response based on data that was passed in with the request. In the first case, it accepted a query parameter at the end of the query string, and then in the second case, it accepted a path parameter, a piece of data that was actually part of the request path itself. In both of those cases, to get a customized response, we had to go to the address bar of our browser and manually type in the path or the query string that we wanted that had that piece of data. Web applications don't generally work like that. You've probably rarely, if ever, manually typed in a query string into the URL bar of your browser. The way they normally work is they accept data in other ways, via a form, for example. So let's look at how we can create a form that will allow a user to type in their name, and then it will greet them accordingly. We're actually going to need a new method to just display the form, to do nothing else other than display the form. So at the bottom of my hello controller class, I'm going to create some space and create a new get mapping. And I want this one to live at /form. So I'm going to put form in parens after get mapping. I also need response body. And I'm going to say this is a public string hello form is the name of my method. It doesn't need any parameters because all it's going to do is return a string that contains some HTML. So I'm going to make a string here, and this string is going to be a little ugly, especially since it lives in Java code. It's going to be long. It's going to have a bunch of HTML. And I'll show you a little trick here. If you put your cursor between the double quotes, you can start typing your HTML. So let me put my HTML tag, and then I'll hit enter. And as long as my cursor is still within those double quotes, IntelliJ will automatically insert the close quote, the concatenation symbol, and that'll put my cursor on a new line in between double quotes itself. So you can, as long as you keep that cursor between double quotes, you save yourself a lot of extra typing and a lot of formatting headaches. So within my HTML tag, I need to create a body tag. And then within that, I need to create a form. And my form needs an input of type equals text. Now notice that when I said type equals text, instead of using double quotes around the word text, as you might be used to within HTML, I use single quotes. That's just because the double quotes are necessary for Java. Those two quotes would conflict otherwise. And my input needs a name, which in this case is going to be name itself. So just to clarify, name is the parameter identifier that will be used to submit whatever's in this form input. And this is just what we're going to be calling that. Okay, so then I have an input, and then let's see what I need next. I need an input of type submit. And I want my input button to say greet me. So I put value equals greet me. The value of a submit input will just be the label that gets put on that button, the little text within the button. Okay, now there's one more thing I need to put in here. Well, actually, I'm not quite done yet. I need to close my form and my other elements. So let me close my form. I'll close my body, and I'll close my HTML element. Okay, there we go. So that's all the HTML I should need to generate a form. There's one more thing I need to do, which is in my form tag, my opening form tag, I need to specify where this form should be submitted. And remember, you might recall that that is done via the action attribute. So within my form tag, I'm going to put action equals, and I'm going to say hello. This tells it to submit a request to /hello. And the reason I did that is I already have a handler method that can dynamically create requests with a query parameter called name. In fact, we made one a couple of videos ago. It's right up here. It's called hello with query param. So if I have my form submit to this particular path with a query parameter, I should get the response I want. I don't need to create anything new. I already have the HTTP handler that I need. Okay, let's go ahead and start our application, and hopefully everything works. Once the application is started, go to your web browser and navigate to localhost 8080/form. And here we see our little tiny form here. It's got a single text input with a button that says greet me on it. Let's type in a value into our form input, if I could spell correctly, LaunchCode. And then I will hit greet me. And that did not work as expected. Let's go back and look and make sure that we set up our HTML right. Oh, I see it. So on this line here with my submit button, I failed to close that input. I missed a closing bracket. So yeah, that was an easy catch. I'll add that closing bracket and I'll restart my application. Now I'll go back and I need to refresh this because I need to get the new form with the proper HTML in it. And so now I still have the value LaunchCode in my input. Let me click Greet Me Now. And now notice what happened. Notice that not only do I have the response, hello LaunchCode, which is what I was hoping for, but if we look at the URL, notice the request that was made. By submitting the form, we made a GET request to/hello with name equals LaunchCode just to tie all these pieces together. The reason that worked is that my form input had a single input called name, and I also happened to have a request handler above that accepted requests at the same path with a query parameter called name. So that's the reason that worked. One final piece to tie it all together is that this form does not have a method. Sometimes you might within the form tag, the form element, you might have a method attribute, which might be method equals get, method equals post. I left that off sort of intentionally. The default method, if you don't include one, will be get. That means that by default, a form, if not specified otherwise, will be submitted via a get request. So since I had my handler method up above configured to handle get requests via the get mapping annotation, everything was wired up to work correctly. What if I wanted to actually submit this form via a post request? That turns out to be a little bit more work, but not much. Let me go ahead and stop my server and we can see how we can do that. So let's do a couple of things. First, let's modify our form. So in my hello form method, I'm going to go inside of the form elements and add an attribute method equals post. Okay. So now this form, when rendered, will make post requests when submitted. Now I do not have any method handlers in here that handle post requests. All of my handlers only accept get requests. And basically what I would really, really like, to be honest, I would really like if this method that we use to handle a get request could just also do post requests. It would be really cool if my hello with query param method would also take, say, a post mapping annotation. Okay, so this might be what you try to do at first. So you might say, well, let me just add another annotation to this method. I'll make it a post mapping as well, so then it accepts both get and post requests. That's a pretty good guess. It turns out that that doesn't work. So let me show you what does work. So on our hello with query param method, we're going to remove both of the get and post mapping annotations. And we're going to use a newer and more general annotation. This one's called request mapping. Okay, so rather than specifying get or post in the annotation name using get mapping or post mapping, we're going to use this more general one, request mapping. And within parens, we can put method equals, or sorry, method equals. And then in curly braces, request method dot get, comma, request method dot post. The request mapping annotation is a more general version of @get mapping or @post mapping, and the way you specify which types of requests a method tagged with request mapping will accept is by putting them in the annotation parameters. So here I'm saying that I want to accept both get and post requests. I also need to put in my path again, so I cut off my path. The way I put in my path here is I say value equals hello. So this now specifies that this method is wired up to live at the route/hello, and it should accept both get and post requests. Okay. Now this should also be wired up to my form. This should all work. So let's start our application once again and try it out. Once the application is started, we'll go back to our browser and we'll once again browse to localhost:80:80/form. And my form is rendered. Now, hopefully, when I make a request this time, hopefully it makes a post request and hopefully we get the response we want. Okay, so that did seem to work. I just submitted the form. I got the response, hello Java, which is what I wanted. Looking at the URL, we see that the string Java was not submitted as part of the query string. If we want to be sure that this made a post request, we can go ahead and open our browser developer tools and go to the network tab. And let's go back and do it again. So I just went back to localhost:80:80, again to the form. I'm going to hit greet me. And then in the network tab, I see that the method that request was submitted with is indeed post. So that's how you wire up not only a form, but also a request handler to deal with post requests.